Hi, I'm Rebecca Harris, and welcome to Senior Moments. On this show today, we're going to be talking to my good friend Steve Scott. Steve and I met through music. We had a lot of friends mutually that enjoy music and go and listen to live music and support music venues, and it seemed like I saw Steve in a lot of different places, and so I started paying attention to the things that he was interested in because Steve is a very, very fascinating person, and you're going to hear that in our interview coming up next.
This is my friend Homer. He says he plays in the key of C because you can see right through him.
And like I said, my friend Steve Scott is a very fascinating person, and he may not really think that he is, but if you come and tour his man cave, you would find out all of the things that he's done in his life is represented in his home. So when I started talking to him about where we should do this interview, he said, "Why don't you come to my house?" And I'm so glad I did, because this place is absolutely beautiful, and it is just covered with things that you've saved over your lifetime of all of the things that you've done and been involved in. But the reason that I wanted to talk with my friend Steve today is because he is an inspiration to me, and I hope that he will be to you as well. Steve decided that it was never too late for him to do things that he was interested in doing. And one of his latest passions is art, and he's been writing books. Steve is going to be putting on an event in Columbus, Georgia that we're very excited about, and it's called Strut the Hooch. And this is a prime example of how you can go out and do something that you just love to do just for fun. So tell us a little bit about that event.
Strut the Hooch is not an original idea. There are lots of crazy parades around the country. Most of them are political satire, which we couldn't get away with in Columbus because we're too sensitive. But I went to Richard Bishop when he was president of Uptown Columbus, which is kind of the Chamber of Commerce for the downtown area. And I figured I had about a 10% chance of talking him into not only a concept, but a very vague and remote concept. So he said, yes, let's try it. And so the first year we had the Columbus Comic Parade, and everybody had fun. We only had about 26 people, and the people that saw it said, well, that's neat. What is it? And I realized that we had to be a little snazzier and have some identity, so I worked hard on branding, and I've worked real hard to take it from that funny little old man's parade to our parade, and I think we're getting there. If you want to know what it's about, people ask me all the time, what's the point? Well, with all the meanness and hatred and evil we see every day, I wanted an event where we could celebrate our differences, love each other, and just be goofy for half an hour. So
that's right.
That's the point.
A little fun and a little laughter goes a long way.
So it's strutting your stuff on the Chattahoochee. Actually, it's on Broadway, but if you want to be in it and you're the slightest bit odd or eccentric, this is your deal.
All right, and we have a clip we want to show you of this parade. So, Steve, we're standing here in front of this world map. And there's so many things that you've done in your career in the Navy and also in your travels. But before we get to all of that, I want you to tell us where you're from and how you wound up in Columbus, Georgia.
I was born in Fairhope, which was a lucky break because Fairhope has always been an artistic community and also a farming community. Now I couldn't afford to live there because it's gotten so popular. But it's on the eastern shore of Mobile Bay, and my mother came over on the bay steamer before there was a road in 1926. And when we were growing up, we always thought, I can't wait to blow this town. We didn't have any idea what a cool place it was. Every day in the summer, I spent 12 hours in the water. And there were so many wood carvers and artists and musicians. It was just really a neat place.
And you just soaked all that up as a child.
Yeah, my mother went to the Art Institute of Chicago, and she never really did anything with it, but she had us drawing, painting. When I was 5, I would mix tempera paints and paint little wood scenes and get the colors right, and I never thought anything about it. And I went to a strange little school, which is pretty famous. It was called the Marietta Johnson School of Organic Education, and it was very unstructured. You learned at your own pace. They had lots of folk dancing and music and everything. So when I was 5, I could throw a clay pot on a potter's wheel and not think anything about it. I didn't know that was different. Then as you get older and you get all that self-confidence beat out of you, you lose it. Like, people ask me why I didn't illustrate my own children's books, and I said, I can't do it. And my good friend Jeff Holbrook made me do it, and I did it.
That's amazing.
It was very surprising to me, but one of the illustrations I did on my iPad, which is proof that an old dog can learn new tricks.
That's right. Well, so you left that area, and then how did you wind up in Columbus, Georgia?
I went to Auburn and spent a year in architecture. I thought it was weird enough, but I had some defining moments, and so I moved to the building next door and changed to music. So I became a music ed major. So my first wife was a Spanish teacher, and she taught at Opelika High School when I was getting my master's in education. And then she had an opportunity for a fellowship, so it was my turn to pay the bills. So I got a job teaching band in Phoenix City, Alabama. So I was the band director at Central High from 71 to 75. And I wish I had never left. That was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. we didn't win many awards, but we had a wonderful time. And the kids that were seniors when I went there are now 63.
Wow. Well, I know that you had a very big influence on them.
Well, there's still 40 or 50 of them that keep up with me on Facebook, and it's just fun.
That's awesome. Well, I want you to take us to visit your music room here in your man cave. So follow me. Let's go see the music room. Mr. Steve.
What's the password?
I don't know.
Fun.
Fun, okay. Well, I see your tuba.
Well, Paul Vandergents one time asked me, why did you buy a tuba? And I said, so I can toot my own horn. And I'm a rank beginner on tuba, but I just love to play. It's so much fun to play.
Well, this is a great music room, and I love it that you have everything set up so that whenever you feel like coming down here making music, you can. And not only do we see your musical instruments, but we see some fabulous artwork in here. So I mentioned to you before that Steve is not only a musician, but he's also an artist. So I see one picture over here that I'm very, very familiar with this lady, Ma Rainey. So tell us a little bit about how you learned how to do this.
Well, the first 3, my wife Adeline did, and she doesn't like me to say how old she is, but she's pretty close to my age. And she did these in a style called vibrant colors. taught by Kelly Newsom, and I went with her on some workshops. So she did Marilyn and Willie and Ray Charles. And in one of the workshops, I attempted to do Ma Rainey and Louis Armstrong.
Well, I think you did a great job on it. So, with your music, after you left Central High School, what else did you do musically?
I took my drums with me when I went in the Navy after Auburn, and this set of drums is 60 years old, close to 60.
They're beautiful.
And I took them on the ship with me to Vietnam and all around South America and to the Mediterranean, I think.
So you had part of home with you everywhere you went.
Yeah, I insist on having fun. I've only had one bad blind date in my life, and I always thought, I'm going out with this person, I'm going to have fun, and if they want to have fun, they can have fun too. And one night, there was a young lady who I obviously didn't match her expectations, and she was acting snarky, so I just took her home. So had a happy life.
And then you met the love of your life.
Well, yeah, Adeline and I knew each other and had classes at Auburn in 1963. And I had kind of a crush on her, but she was married at the time, so she was somebody else. And I didn't see her for another 25 years. And then I remembered her and found out she had just moved to Columbus, and I called her up, and she said, "Who?" And so she teases me about having a backup date. I had a backup date because she sounded so unsure. So the backup date was a friend of mine. She said she'd be my backup date. So
That's funny.
and so the only woman I've ever had to chase, and I'm still chasing her.
Well, it's obvious that it was meant to be because the two of you have a beautiful home together and you share so many of the same passions. So I'm excited for you about that.
Yeah, April 9th will be 23 years.
That's
and
great.
28 together. So
That's great. Well, like I said, we have a lot to talk about with Steve, and I know that we're just jumping all over the place in his life, but I guess what I want you to see is how many things he's involved in, because not only are you a musician, but you also write children's books.
yes, the first two I wrote were really stories I made up for my younger children when they were 6 and 9, and they're now 36 and 33. And the first one was about kudzu, because like looking in the clouds to see animals and faces in the clouds, we'd look in the kudzu to see animals and faces, and Sarah would say, "Oh, look, there's a T-Rex. Oh, there's a mama monster crossing the road or ready to snatch up a car for breakfast." And so it stayed in a folder for however many years until I was able to retire and do something with it. And the second book, Grunions with Onions, we actually wrote together because I read him a bedtime story like I did every night, and this one particular book was pretty lame. And so Stephen said, "Gee, Dad, that one wasn't so hot." And Sarah, being Sarah, says, "Yeah, we can do better than that." So I said, "Okay, Smarty Vance, you come up with an idea and we'll write the book." And they came up with an idea of a little boy who didn't like vegetables, and he griped about his mother's cooking. And he had what we call in Columbus a hissy fit one night and went into town, and everywhere he went was more bizarre than the last place, and he finally came home. But so that got me interested, and so I've just published my 5th children's book called
Wow.
The World According to Professor Petey, and Professor Petey is one of my grandkids. And I started calling him that when he was 4. I heard this wee voice from the back seat say, "Papa, I'm much smarter than you."
Oh.
So I said, "Hold that thought till you're 16. And the joke was when he was 5, he was so confident, and he has this thing, he has to chime in on anything anybody says, whether he knows what he's talking about or not. And so we've even made up stuff, a subject, and he'd say, "Actually, that's not correct. My mother says whatever." So
He sounds like an interesting little guy.
he's pretty bright, and the fantasy in the world, according to Professor Petey, is in his head about being a bold explorer. He's kind of a Calvin and Hobbes overconfident little guy in the story. But he has been some cool places. He's been to Guam several times, and his daddy took him to the Galapagos Islands for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And he lives in Hawaii.
That's cool.
Matter of fact, when they lived in Houston, he got in trouble for missing the unit on volcanoes. At the time, he was down in an active volcano.
Oh.
So that's Professor Petey.
He had hands-on learning then.
Yeah.
Like you did when you were a child. Mm-hmm. Well, there's something that I want you to talk a little bit about, and that is your Navy career. So I know that you have a room set up here just all about your Navy career. So can we go see that?
That is my Naval Officers Club.
That's cool.
Let's go.
Let's go see it.
Come on in.
Wow, this is so cool.
Well, I've always loved officers' clubs, and when I was on active duty, the culture unfortunately revolved around drinking. So at 1600, then you went to the club, and officers' clubs, when I was on active duty, were so opulent. They had wine fountains and chocolate fountains, and your friends would beg you to take them to the O Club.
Wow.
And now it's kind of rare. It's a shame for that part. I understand the de-emphasis on all the drinking. So since O Clubs are disappearing, I wanted to have my very own Naval Officers Club, and I would come down here in the dark with just me and the spiders and think, this is going to go here and this is going to go there. And people were saying, what is he doing? And I tried to explain the vision, and behind my back they would say, that poor man, because they didn't see the vision. But this is what I had in my mind.
This is absolutely beautiful.
And one of my favorite things is to create stuff, whether it's a recipe or when I was a kid, a rabbit cage or whatever. And to see an idea go all the way through the process and end up being a real thing.
So how long did it take you to put this together?
The whole basement, 7 years.
And you said there's 11 rooms down here?
11 rooms, 2,600 square feet. I had to learn and do it at the same time. So I got my feelings hurt a lot, and my knuckles skinned, and my thumbs hammered. So I was essentially my own architect, building contractor, interior designer, and hands-on I probably did 60% of it. I got experts to do the hard parts, like I can do chair rail framing, trim work, but to frame out a window or a door is very intricate, and so I got people to do those kind of things. So.
Well, I'm really happy to see that when you walk down here, you feel a sense of accomplishment because you dreamed this, and here it is. So one of the things that we want to say to our friends about you, Steve, is your mind is constantly going about things that you want to do, and you have not stopped. And you told me, and I hope you don't mind me sharing, but you're 75 right now. And a lot of us have things that we wanted to do that we've never been able to do. But now is your time to savor this senior moment, go to the art classes, dream up the things that you want to do, and do it. You have time to do it now. If you don't know how to do it, get with other seniors who may have the experience that you're looking for, and y'all can do it together. And it can form friendships, and it'll be something that you can take your friends into and be proud of. But I know that I see a lot of things around this room that you collected over the years that you saw potential in and why you wanted to keep them. And sometimes people throw things away and they don't realize the value of them or how much they'll mean to you later on in life. So some of the things that you have got framed here are just amazing. So can you show us some of the things that are the most special to you in this room?
Yes, I guess I collect things, and one of my favorite things to collect is friends. I had a friend tell me one time, you know, you collect women. And I said, well, they're worse hobbies. But the truth is, I collect people, and the further truth is, if I meet somebody and I like them, even though our circumstances change, I don't throw them away. Mm-hmm. So if I saw somebody last night that I knew when he worked at Service Merchandise in 1977, and I spoke to him and I knew his name.
Wow.
And so I'm also a matchmaker, not a romantic matchmaker, but I like to get people together, mm-hmm. which creates a synergistic effect. One of my favorite ones was when Tim Mescon, who was president of CSU, retired. He and Lauren moved to Amsterdam. And my good friend Sietske Johnson, who was art teacher at St. Luke, was Dutch. And she was home in the Netherlands, and I got them together, and they went all over Europe together. And to me, that's just fun.
You took the time to do that.
Yeah.
That's great.
And recently, I went to approach the symphony and the Fort Benning MCOE band and offered to be their community ambassador, which they must have thought I was crazy, but my point was getting people together.
Right.
And so Kristen Hudson, who is the marketing director for the symphony, mm-hmm. went out with me. We had an audience with the new band commander, Captain Aaron Morris, and the First Sergeant Bill Holmes. And normally when you deal with the military, you might get a polite thank you for coming by. Mm-hmm. There was electricity in that room, and they immediately started talking about joint concerts and master classes and getting on the commanding general's schedule, and it was magic.
That's awesome.
So
that was
that's
an inspiring thing.
I like to do. Well, this has become kind of a museum because when people come over, and I host a little party for Navy and Sea Service people the week of the Navy's birthday. Mm-hmm. And then people will say, you know, if I can find it, it's somewhere in the basement or the attic. I've got a whatever. Uh-huh. And then they bring it. Let me show you. Paul Schneider brought me these machine gun bullets and these patches. And Dr. Tom Bernard, who's a good friend of ours, orthopedic surgeon and also an organist. He and his wife play organ at Holy Family Catholic Church. He found this 3-inch shell, and I got it polished. And some things that I don't find that I just make because I had an idea for this lamp. For 3 years, I looked for a piece of wood like that, and I finally found it, but it was connected to 17 more feet of it. And I drug it down the beach like 1.5 miles until I found somebody with an axe. And this hatch cover, I made this table for my hatch cover.
That's beautiful.
The Liberty and Victory ships in World War II were open hulled, meaning that when they put cargo in, they put it in the very bottom by mm-hmm. the keel, and then they built another deck with these things and threw a tarp over it and more cargo and then another level, and then they had a waterproof hatch on the top. And okay. These were the things that made the floor. So,
well, tell me about the flag behind you.
This is a Union Jack that flies on the front part of your ship, the forecastle, when you're in port. And the signalmen on my ship were throwing this away. It's a beautiful, it's just the blue and white, the red's the background. it's a beautiful flag. I said, why are you throwing it away? It's 100% wool. They said, well, it's only got 48 stars. And of course, this was before we added Hawaii and Alaska as states. And so it was just too pretty to throw away, so I had it framed.
It's beautiful. Well, come, let's go sit down for a minute and talk a little bit more about you. So we're in the home of Steve and Adeline Scott. And Adeline just joined us. Steve had to take a really short break for a minute. I'm so glad you came home.
Thank you.
But I was
Thank you.
afraid I was going to miss you.
Yeah.
Adeline is an artist. And she's not only an artist, but she's very, very gifted in so many ways. And one of the reasons that I wanted to spend some time getting to talk to Adeline, I think we could probably do a whole show about Adeline. I want you to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start taking art classes and painting and doing the beautiful things that you've done. I think you've discovered a talent you didn't even realize you had.
Well, it was certainly a new area for me, and I have been a musician all my life, professional musician, and have worked in classical music and heard beautiful music. I've done concerts. I've been to concerts. I have 2 degrees in performance of music, and so that's kind of a field where I really had my 10,000 hours.
Right.
And I love the music, and it has kept me floating. I mean, it has been my stronghold in my life through many deep waters, as everybody has had. But when I retired from teaching school, I decided maybe painting and art would be interesting and fun, and I didn't have any clue of what it really involved. And so I was digging into things. I'd taken a couple of classes and workshops, and then I had this tremendous trauma in my life. And I lost my son, who was 45 years old.
I'm sorry.
And I was just very stunned about that. And a few weeks later, 6 weeks later exactly, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I kind of was like a deer in headlights. I really didn't know what to do next. And there wasn't a lot I could do. I needed to recuperate and try to pull my life together. And so the first thing I did was pick up a pencil and draw a picture of my son. And I realized, wow, this is making me feel calm and peaceful, and I'm enjoying this so much. Maybe I should draw more and paint more. And so I kind of jumped in with both feet. I'm sort of a self-taught artist, but I seek other professionals, and so I began taking more workshops, spending more time in my studio. And I just found it to be a world that took me back. It took me back to childhood because it was colors and shapes.
Right.
Bright colors, like kindergarten. You know, when you're coloring bright red and yellow and green, and it makes you happy.
Right.
So I just all of a sudden realized this art was therapeutic for me. And so I kept it up, and I'm still just really involved in it. In fact, I'm taking a course now at CSU in Fundamentals of Art. And so I just love it because it has been such an answer to turmoil for me and grief. And it has really saved me and kept me feeling creative and blessed. And so I just do this all the time.
Well, that's wonderful, and I'm so glad that you followed your heart and did that. I think sometimes God gives us talents that we don't even realize that we have.
Well, I do too, and I certainly didn't know I had any artistic talent. I was like the people who say, well, I can't even draw a straight line, or I can't draw a stick figure. Well, I couldn't. I did not ever show any dramatic piece of paper with a drawing on it. And so I had to learn this as a skill. And of course you have to learn the fundamentals of art just like you do music. And practice your scales in music when you practice your drawing and your basic art fundamentals. And so I just have discovered that it is therapeutic for a lot of people.
Well, shortly we're going to go upstairs and hopefully you can show us some of the artwork that you've done and displayed here in this beautiful home.
Okay.
But before we do that, I was wondering if you could tell our friends, just inspire them a little bit and tell them how you coped. I know that you have a very, very strong faith in God.
I do.
And I know that you're playing in the church all those years and giving of your life and the volunteer work and all of the things that you've done and being an educator. You've always been a giver.
Yes,
but then
I have.
you got to a point where you needed somebody to give to you.
Well, I sure did.
And
yes.
I've been through some tragedy myself, and I'm sure that everyone has. But the Holy Spirit just comes and just bathes you in comfort and gives you ways to cope with things. And I'm just so inspired that your art did that for you, because when people look at that, they can see the love that you put into it and the healing of the pieces that you have up there. I was just walking around looking, going, wow, that is just amazing.
Well, I choose bright colors because they make me happy. And as I was working through my grief, I realized that grief is like a wall, and it's very thick and very tall, very strong, and you can't ever make it go away. So I decided I would decorate it. And so I chose my bright colors and my happy mood, and I was thinking of it as hanging on the wall.
Right.
And sorry, but whenever I talk about it, this can happen, that you are back there for a moment and then you back away.
Right.
You can't stay at the wall. You really
That is
can't.
such an amazing way to put that.
You've just got to back away and give yourself some rest and say, well, now I'm going to hang this piece of art on that wall because it's the happiest thing I can come up with. And
Right.
so I do that as a way of coping and looking at the tragedy.
So what would you say to our friends who may be going through something right now? What would you say to encourage them?
I would say that, as with me, I learned that God would be with me at every turn. And there were a lot of days when I couldn't see it. And so you can see I still suffer from it. And so I back away. You know, if I look at the wall too long, I become very sad. And so I back away, and I am with my friends, and I'm teaching, and I'm hearing pretty music as I paint, and I get to a place of happiness, and then I try to stay there. And it's not like I'm running away, because it's always there. But I think that this is the only way you can live, is to look for the happy things.
That's right. Adeline, that was so beautiful
Thank
that
you.
you shared that with us, and I appreciate you so much. Thank
you. Thank you.
So, Steve, while you went upstairs to take your phone call, I know you're a very busy man. Thank you for taking time to let us come into your home today. Your lovely wife came home.
Ain't she lovely?
Yeah, she's beautiful. And I had a chance to get her to sit down and talk to me for a minute. And she talked to us about how art helped her get through the death of your son. And I know this is a very, very hard subject to talk about, but I watched you go through some horrible, horrible grief. And at the time, my heart was breaking for you. But I could also see that you didn't stop living. You continued on, and you have told me before some words of wisdom that your mother gave to you about when tragedy strikes. So can you share that with us?
Well, when you're a kid, you don't think your parents know anything. She had a lot of wisdom, because when I would be mad or upset about something, I would be grousing and complaining, and she'd say, you need to go do something for somebody else. And I'd say, nah, you don't understand. She said, no, you don't understand. You need to go do something for somebody else. And another thing she would tell me when tragedy hit, and I had a wonderful childhood, but it was also kind of sad because I lost everybody that I loved except my mother and my sister by the time I was 19.
Wow.
and both grandmothers had died before I was born, and all the rest were accidents and unexpected tragedies. And when I was 9, my father left it at his own hand, and that affected me for
I'm
years
sure.
and years and years. But she was a very strong woman, and she said, don't be a stationary target. Whatever bad luck hits you, we can't control that, but we can control how it affects us. And I know there are books and books and books, and I used to buy every self-help how to get your stuff together in 15 minutes a day
Right.
book. But that's true. So losing an adult child, losing your child is a parent's worst nightmare, and you never expect it to happen. And in my case, Kyle and I had just finished an 8-day magical mystery tour, father-son trip throughout South Florida and the Keys and Key West, where I met his mother in 1967 when I was in the Navy. And it was a very healing trip. A lot of things happened. We got told, well, so-and-so's not talking to so-and-so, and you need to know that this happened with this happened. And we said, sorry about that. We're on a mission from God to have fun. And so if you want to have fun, we'll be at Sloppy Joe's in Key West. And it was amazing. I don't know if Kyle had a premonition. I think he might have, because that whole trip was healing, and healed in a lot of places in the family. And we were at his favorite place, some property they owned in the Keys in a mangrove island, and he ran and played for 2 hours like he was 7 years old.
Wow.
And
that's
when we were
awesome.
leaving, he picked up some coral sand and said, this is my place, Dad. When it's my time, scatter me here. And I thought it was an odd thing to say, but that's what we did. And part there and part in Machu Picchu, his mother took him. But he was taken by a very selfish person with 5 major drugs in his system that hit him from behind at 125 miles an hour, and was totally senseless, because Kyle was a most wonderful person. He wasn't without his flaws like the rest of us, but the district attorney told me that it wasn't unusual for people to gape in an accident scene, but it was very unusual to have as many people stop to try to help, risk their lives, and stay till the end. The car rolled 400 feet, and it was on fire, and they couldn't get him out, and one of his rescue angels showed up with a pocket knife that his daddy had given him before he died and said, always keep this. He climbed in that car.
Wow.
On fire. It was like the movies. Cut the seatbelt, got him out, and within a minute the car was totally engulfed in flames. And I think people must have sensed his giving spirit. He was turtle rescuer, carried cans of dog food in his car. So I even had one lady tell me I wasn't grieving properly because I wasn't sad all the time. Well, I am sad, but he's still here.
Right.
So it doesn't make me sad to talk about him, because I talk about him on Facebook. So that whole trip was a gift from God.
Yes, it was. And I've seen your posts on Facebook many times, and sometimes, you have a rough day and you know that your friends are praying for you. So I wanted to come here today to talk to you about how you just continued living, and you live this very, very, very full life. And one thing that you said to me is that Kyle challenged you to write a list of 25 things and you said, I don't want to do that. What was the 25 things about? You don't have to tell me what the 25 things were, but
Well,
why did he want you to do that?
he had seen this somewhere on the internet, and he wrote this 25 little known things about Kyle Scott. And he said, Dad, you should do this. And I said, I can't think of even one little known or interesting thing. He said, well, just do it. I said, okay. And so I finally I thought of a time my sister and I and Mother were in a train wreck in a snowstorm south of St. Paul in Minneapolis in the middle of the night, and all that went with that. And so I wrote that down, and that reminded me of something else. And pretty soon I had 25 things, and then I thought of 25 more things. And I thought, well, maybe I'm not as dull as I thought I was. And it was an interesting exercise. That and Facebook has shown me that I'm living a much more fulfilled life than I thought I was. And my problem is I like too many things, and it would take 2 more lifetimes to do everything that I want to do and need to do.
So, Steve, do you have anything else that you would like to say to our friends?
I can't say that I have any words of wisdom, but I have learned this. You never know who's watching. So be nice. I've had things happen 40 and 50 years later. Somebody would tell me something like, you changed my life. And you think, when, how? I don't remember that. So if you're going to be an influence on somebody, whether you know it or not, or like it or not, be nice, be encouraging. We're all supposed to be here to help each other.
Right.
And to me, the meaning of life is it's a giant homework assignment, and the lesson is love. And here we are hating and killing each other. So we're supposed to be lifting each other up and encouraging. So when you have a mad thought, put it aside and replace it with a glad thought.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, because you have been very inspiring to us today. I've really, really enjoyed spending time with you and your wife today. And I want to talk to you guys about this. I want to challenge you to do a 25 list of little known things about yourself. Because sometimes we get caught up in thinking, well, my life is not as interesting as Steve Scott's life, or my life is not as interesting as her life over here. But you know what? I'm sure you do have a very interesting life, and I would like to encourage you to write that down, because you never know. You might want to pass that on to your children or to your grandchildren, or it might even just make you feel good to look at it and say, I have done some tremendous, exciting things in my life. And if you haven't done those things that you wanted to do, it's not too late to start a bucket list of the things that you want to do, and get out there and get busy and seize those senior moments. So I want to thank you today for joining us today on Senior Moments, and we will see you again really soon.